Now we have a pretty beautiful UI, but we can't do anything yet. So now it's time to get into the middle of the war, to be able to start adding cards, adding lists, and for that we're going to start attacking visual scripting. So what it's going to be first of all to trigger an event when I click on add a card. And this event will create a new card in my store. So I'm going to go to my card component in the builder, and I'm going to select this div there. And I'm going to make sure that when I click on this div, well, it triggers an event. And what is this event? It's the onClick. So if we go to the right panel, we can see that there is an event. So if I click on the little plus, I have several events. The one that interests us is going to be the click. When I create this event, I can click on it or directly go to Logic to see my event that appears. Here I can see that I have an onClick in parentheses div. So this div is what we showed here. And this part there, it's the block, in fact. And for clarity's sake, we can, for example, call it add card. So when we come back to Logic, I have in parentheses add card. And that will allow me to come back to it later when we eventually have plenty of logic. To show you how the grid works, in my example, I just created a log node, which will allow us to display logs in the console. Here, for example, I'm going to write a hello. And there, in fact, you can see that my log is a little bit semi-transparent because, in fact, it is linked to no execution block. What I call an execution block is going to be a block that will allow us to create a suite of different blocks that will be executed one after the other. For example, my execution block, we're going to say it's the onClick here. So here, in fact, I have a kind of white ink. And when I click on it, it's going to create a white thread. This white thread is what we call the execution thread. That means it's going to follow this order. And here you can see that we have a different ink. We call it data ink. And in fact, the colors change depending on the type of data we have. Here, for example, you can see that when we have a chain of characters, it turns yellow. But if, for example, we have a number, it turns green. If we have a Boolean, so check for true and uncheck for false, it turns red. Object, it turns blue, etc., etc. And so thanks to this system, the engine will prevent you from connecting two types that are incompatible. So here, for example, we have an object, but if I put an object here, I could connect this to that. And so as a result, it will allow us to type correctly. And so it will limit the creation of bugs in our application. So I'm going to put hello again here. Here I'm going to create another log where I'm going to put, for example, a number that's going to say 10. And here I'm going to add a Boolean of type true. And so thanks to this execution thread, I'll be able to say when I click on my button, it's going to log hello, then 10, then true. If I want to illustrate the thing, then I'm going to put an animation flag. I'm going to right click on it and do execute. You can see that a small bubble is moving forward and executes each block that we see appearing in the console. So if I clear that and I go back to my preview, if I click on add a task, I'll see all this running one after the other. Now, our goal is to actually create a new task. So I'm going to delete all of this. And before I do that, a quick reminder. In the properties of my card component, I had title and tasks properties. And these properties, I can retrieve them in my logic. So how do we do it? Well, it's pretty explicit. We're going to right click. And when I type get, I'll be able to retrieve my properties. So get tasks or get title. In fact, what I want to do is retrieve my task, and above those tasks, create a task that is empty. And so to do that, we're going to use the push block. So the push block here allows you to retrieve a table and add a value in this table. By the way, here you can see that I don't have a rounded ink anymore, but I have a square ink. So the square ink that is yellow, yellow means character chain. That means that my tasks are therefore a character chain table. If my square had been red, it would mean that I would have had a Boolean table, etc., etc. So here I have white. Why? Because we don't know what type is expected. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to be able to link my tasks to the expected table. So it's going to turn yellow. And so here's what I'm going to be able to do. It's going to be writing the value of my new box in my table. So for example, I can write a new task. I have one last thing to do is to link my onClick to my task. And so now if I go back to my main and I click on add a task, I have a new task that appears and I can do it forever. Now we're going to want to do the same thing to add a card. So this time we're going to make things a little more complex. I want to be able to decide on the title of my card because every time it's a new task. So we're going to go back to our create button. And what I want to do is display two different states. A state when we're not creating a card, so we'll have this button that's going to show up, and a state when we're creating a card. It will therefore be an input. We can type a text, and that text will be the name of our card. So I can already create a variable isEditing, which will be a Boolean. And this block, which is therefore add a card, I'm going to wrap it in a temp. And that I want to display if and only if isEditing is false. So little clarification, I see add a card no matter what I put here as condition because my preview is on display. If I wanted to have the real conditions of my preview, I can click on it and choose real. So if I put equal here, I won't see it anymore. So I'm going to uncheck that. Then I'm going to put isEditing at true. So and I'm going to add a new template where I'll be able to create my input. So we're going to try to make a quick design because the design is not really the subject of this video. So I'm going to choose a block that will be in UI library, and I'm going to choose text input. I'm going to add a little style to it with a pixel width. And that's what I would also like to do in a second time. It is to display a button with a small V and a button with a small cross if I have text in my text input. So I'm going to do it right away. There, I'm just going to create my two icons in my UI library, and I'm going to modify their properties here. A little V here, which will be of color success light, and another icon here, which will be of color error light. To make it a little prettier, I'm still going to wrap it in a block and put a flex display in it so that everything is aligned with an align item center. I'm going to increase the size a little. 35 and 35 here, the same. So now we have almost everything we need. So step number one, it's going to be to make sure to switch from isEditing to true or false when I click on my add a card button. So to do this, I'm going to add an event on top of my add a card button, a click event. I'm going to go back to my logic, and what I'm going to do is just going to be pull my execution thread, and I'll be able to directly type set for set isEditing, and set isEditing, I'm going to pass it to true. A little cheat code that I forgot to say just before is that if you click on control and space, you can see the value of each element, which frees you to put console locks everywhere, for example. And you can do the same thing with control plus alt to see the type that is waiting for each time. So if I go back to my create button in the builder, that I pass this template in real, and that I add the conditions, so isEditing to true, that I pass in preview. Normally, if I click on it, I have access to my input. Now, step two, what I want to do is, so first of all, we just want to write something here. And when I click on the little check, I want it to log me what's in it. So again, I'm going to click on my create button in the tree. And this time I have to add one more variable. And this variable is going to be the title, which will be a character chain. To make sure that when I write in my input, my title is automatically updated, I have to define it in my input text. So here, by using the V model. The model is a way to keep a field of form always up to date. So that means that when the user is going to type something in my input, the variable will change. And if somewhere in my code I change the variable, it will be reflected in the field of text. So now that we've created this logic, we can make sure that I display these two icons only if title is defined. So if the title is not empty, what I can do is wrap this in a component, so a template, and add my condition if title is not equal to empty. So now, normally, if I start typing something, I should see my two buttons appear. Now that we've done that, we can add our two events on each icon. So that's validate. We're going to add a click, and that's going to be delete. So the validate that I'm going to do first is just to log the title of my future card. So what I'm going to do is just get the title and a log here. And so here, I can link this value anchor here so that it logs me the name of my title. And so all I have to do is link my unclick to the log. And if I go back to my preview and I do that, I have my hello displayed in the console. In the other direction, if I want to clear my field, when I click on the cross, I'm going to go back to logic. And this time, instead of using a get, I'm going to use a set, for example. So I'm going to make this title empty. And so there, once again, when I go back to my preview and I put hello and I click on the cross, I have my field clearing. So now that we've done all that, we can start creating a card that has for title. I remind you that the diagram of a card looks like this. We have a title and a list of tasks. So basically what I want to do is, first of all, get all my cards. And at the end of this card table, I add a new card that I create with my title and a list of tasks that is empty. So what I want to do is get my data that is in the store. So I'm going to do a get. So there I called it a new store. So get new store. And there, in fact, if I do space control, I see that I'm getting all that back. In fact, I'm getting an object. But what interests me is the properties inside this object. So the list of cards. In fact, what I'm going to use is the spread. The spread allows you to break my object in order to recover all its properties. So I know it's not very clear, so I'm going to give you an example. If I do a spread of that, I'm going to have my list of cards. Then let's imagine that I want the spread. Well, in fact, it's not possible because it's not an object, but an object table. So then I'm going to do a hat, for example, to get the first element of the table, so 0. And then I have an object again. I have an item. This item there, I can spread it again. And so there I'm going to have title and task. And in fact, I can continue as many times as I want to get the properties of this or that object. To go even further in my example, if I go back to my store and here I add properties, for example, so here I'm going to put nobody, I'm going to put age. I'm going to create, for example, another object, games. There I'm going to add a string. I don't know, I'm going to put GTA. And in fact, I'll be able to break down each object to recover the properties of this object. So if I go back to my button here in the logic, you can see that I don't only have cards anymore, but I also have nobody and nobody. It's same. I can spread it to have age and games and games. I can spread it to have GTA, etc., etc. Close parentheses. I delete all that and we can go back to our sheep. So then I'm going to spread my store to get my list of cards. Once it's done, then I delete the log. I'm going to want to use the push not we were earlier. So I'm linking it to that, so my current table, and that's going to be the element that we're going to add to our table. So this element is not the same as last time. Last time it was just a string of characters. There it's going to be an object because it's going to contain a title and a list of tasks. What we want to do here is create an object, and my create object, I'll be able to modify it a little bit as I go. So here I know that I'm going to have an object that contains a string, which is therefore the title, and then it's going to be a string table. But what I'm doing here is completely useless. Why? Because in fact, I'm putting the same types as card type. So in fact, instead of defining all that, what I can do is delete all that, and there I'm going to select directly my type, which will be card type. And so there, my get title, I'm going to link it to my title. My tasks, I can leave it like that. So it looks like that. So it's going to be an empty table. And my create object, I can link it here. So I just have to link that to that. And normally, if I go back to preview and I want to add a card, for example, test, I have my new card that appears. Now to refine all of this a little bit, not very responsive, but hey, we'll get through it. Well, I'd have to set my new title to empty and also set ease editing to false. So then hop, I go back in there in 2 seconds. So there I can set ease editing to false, it's good. And I can put set title to empty. And so there you go. If I go back to main, I have everything that works. I can add tasks and I can add cards. It updates my store as a result. And we have a Trello that is pretty much functional. In the next video, I'm going to show you the computed variables that will allow us to have a fluid and pleasant application to use for the user. Ciao.